Witness what it's like to be a non-binary pregnant person and then a parent. Hello and welcome back to I'm the Xaddy. This episode is about trimester 1. Those first 12 weeks of pregnancy are often seen as the most fragile, the most invisible, and according to Tommy's pregnancy information, this is the stage where the embryo starts developing rapidly and the heart begins to form and starts beating around week 6. The neural tube develops into the brain and spinal cord, and the placenta begins building itself as the life support system for what's growing. But none of that is visible at first. What you feel instead is something much harder to explain. I personally remember thinking, nothing looks any different, so why does everything feel so different? But in this episode, I'm not telling this story alone. You'll hear from my partner throughout this episode too. We recorded our parts separately, so if you do notice the audio changing a bit, that's the reason. But I wanted to include both of our perspectives because even though the physical changes were happening inside my body, we were both experiencing trimester 1 together. So every now and again, I'll hand over to her so she can share what she remembers, what she noticed, and what this stage really felt like from her point of view. Trimester 1 starts before you even realise it started, because right after you've done that test and it's positive and you find out you're pregnant, you realise you're already in it. There's this weird moment when you find out and the experience of getting pregnant and being pregnant suddenly splits into before and after. And what stands out the most to me is the moment I saw that positive test and then the quiet that followed. Just waiting and hoping that everything would develop as it should. I remember staring at the test way longer than I really needed to because my mind went quiet. Time seemed to slow down and the shock set in because in that moment I knew that nothing after that test would ever be the same again. But I asked my partner what they remembered about that moment.
All I remember feeling in that moment was just complete and utter shock. Everything stopped, like time seemed to stop. I couldn't hear properly. I couldn't feel anything. My entire body went numb, and then I was just this huge like wave of joy just hit me, and just looking at each other and just such disbelief and just intense, crazy, wild joy. I think in that moment I just really, really tried as well to be present, and I do relive that moment quite frequently. I would say I'm quite a pragmatic and logical person, so it was quite challenging to not jump straight into pragmatic mode. But for that moment, I really just wanted to soak it all in and enjoy it as much as possible. And in many ways, it still doesn't really feel real. Sometimes it does, and especially when we're getting ready for the baby and doing things and going to scans and appointments, all that stuff feels really real. But I do catch myself every now and again just kind of going, is this really happening? Or am I dreaming?
It's strange to realise that even though nothing looked different yet, there were already systems forming inside me that would one day sustain a tiny life. And I don't think I understood that at the time. In the first trimester, your body changes so fast, even if you can't see it yet. Hormones like HCG and progesterone increase quickly, and That often causes fatigue and nausea and strong emotions, which I've talked about before. My body was basically changing everything to support the pregnancy. And I didn't know that's what was happening at the time. I didn't understand that. I just knew that I couldn't really trust my energy levels anymore. And I remember feeling that before I could really explain it. I wasn't just tired. It was the whole idea of being tired changed in a way that I couldn't define. Sometimes I'd feel completely fine, and then suddenly I'd have to go and stop and lie down, as if my body had just shut down without warning. It was like hitting overload and it needed to reset. According to Tommy's guidance, this is when the placenta starts forming properly, building the connection between the parent and the embryo, even before you can feel it. And I think that's what it felt like emotionally too. Something forming, but not quite real yet. I then asked my partner what they'd noticed changing in me.
I think I certainly noticed physical and emotional changes happening long before the first trimester. When we had to move to medicated assisted fertility and moving to jabs and things like that, I think there was a lot more hormones that you weren't really used to, and you seem to be a lot more quicker to feel things. I mean, unfortunately, it often was emotions that you wouldn't necessarily always want to feel, kind of like sadness or worry, fear. Those feelings seem to come a little bit quicker, and it was like directly in line with the progesterone as well. I remember us having a really interesting chat about you kind of like experiencing PMS kind of for the first time, which you'd never really experienced before, fortunately. But it was really interesting to see you go through these hormonal shifts that me personally had experienced for a very long time. There was then other things that changed quite quickly. I mean, like eating preferences and things like that. They came quite early on. So because of nausea and other kind of like sensitivities, moving to rich tea biscuits and Jaffa cakes, doing supermarket runs and things like that for whatever you desired. That was quite new. And of course, did get tired very quickly. So things took a little longer, or you definitely kind of struggled to get through the things that you would have found easier prior to this. And the thing is with pregnancy, it's just so individual to the person. But one thing, it seemed really clear to me that you were experiencing the hormone side of things really different to your general day-to-day cycles.
What surprised me the most is how something so biologically active can still feel so emotionally unreal, all at the same time. Because I wasn't really convinced it was happening for the longest time. But fatigue took over, and in the first trimester, it isn't just about being tired, it's exhaustion that's deep down, way down in your cells. My body was building a whole new system, and it needed constant energy, all while I was trying to just go about my daily life. It was really hard to function when it felt like my energy had completely changed. I had to really start listening to my body in a way that I'd never had before. I remember one day I sat down for just 1 minute and it turned into hours, and I didn't even realise how exhausted I was until I stopped moving. Then there were days I felt awful and days I didn't feel so bad, but I just didn't feel like me. So I asked my partner what they saw at the time.
I definitely could see you slowing down and needing more time to function. You definitely needed more rest for everything, which was absolutely fine. Not a problem at all. But you usually have like so much energy. You have way more energy than I do. And we just learned to work with the rhythm of your body, which we still do now. That's been a big shift, but a good shift. And I guess for me, one thing that I'm constantly trying to do is learn how to support you through this evolution, because you're changing, needs are changing, wants are changing, likes are changing. And I think we both have had to get really comfortable with unpredictability, because your body and what you're experiencing is changing minute by minute.
I kept trying to match my old energy level to a body that had already moved on without me, and it felt really quite strange to navigate. But there's also another layer beneath all of this. While my body was going through changes I couldn't really control, I was also dealing with the identity challenges at the same time. And the language around pregnancy doesn't always leave space for nuance. It's very binary, it's very defined, and it's very prescriptive. During the first trimester, I didn't always have the words to describe how it felt in my body. I wasn't used to the feelings yet, so I felt a little lost at times. I felt a bit unanchored in how I was being seen, and not because of my partner, but because of the language around pregnancy. Using badger notes, as I mentioned in my last episode, caused a lot of upset early on for both of us as we were becoming parents. So I asked my partner how she felt at the time.
When it comes to gender and then the pregnancy, we always talk about everything really open and honestly. So I trusted that you would come to me if you had anything that you were kind of struggling with or questioning, and we'd talk things through, or I'd just listen. It certainly felt like pregnancy's been another fluid process. So some days and minutes you seem to soften, and then other times you're more stoic and pragmatic. But this is just really in line with how I perceive your gender anyway. It's just translated into pregnancy as well. I think I just learned quite quickly that I needed to be more of an advocate. I am always anyway, but this was a little bit more important. So I did my learning, I did my research, and try to make sure, and continue to try to make sure, that I'm supporting or advocating for you in those scenarios that might just need a little bit more support. I never want to talk on your behalf or otherwise, but there are certain things in pregnancy where having that extra person there to support you is incredibly important. I didn't really worry too much about use of language, because we always talk about that and we use the words that work for us. And I think I'm still really navigating how to support you. You know, I'm learning how you like or need to be supported in all aspects of life and pregnancy, whether it's supporting you or like being an advocate, foot rubs, supermarket runs, midwife appointments, late night Jaffa cake acquiring. I guess I just need to take more care and attention now, because pregnancy can be really vulnerable and empowering. But when you need that extra little bit of support, that's what I'm there for.
Emotionally, trimester 1 felt unpredictable. Part of that was the hormonal shifts that not only affected my body but also affected my emotional regulation. But the other part was psychological. The reality of what was happening sat alongside normal life, which just kept going as if nothing had changed. There was also this extra layer of non-binary discomfort about what was happening in my body, and all the questions about how I would handle the mental and physical changes. So underneath all that, there was this constant background feeling that everything was already different, and yet no one else could see it. I felt excited and scared at the same time, and most of the time I didn't know which feeling to trust more. I'm not good at secrets, so it was difficult to keep quiet about being pregnant for 12 weeks. We told a couple of people closest to us, and that made me feel a lot better because I was worried about losing the baby and not having the support for us, especially during all those what if moments and worst case scenario worries. There's something about the first trimester that brings a quiet background awareness for many people. Early pregnancy is statistically the most uncertain stage. According to Tommy's pregnancy information, this is the stage where miscarriage risk is higher and where many people wait for reassurance scans before fully relaxing into the pregnancy. One thing I wasn't prepared for was how much of trimester 1 is spent trying to work out what is normal. The NHS give you a list of every sensation you might feel, but every new ache, pull, cramp, twinge, or any sort of symptom suddenly felt important, and I kept going back to that list over and over and over again to see whether it was normal. Around week 12, my boobs became incredibly itchy. Not just slightly uncomfortable, I mean properly itchy. And because no one had mentioned that to me before, I immediately wondered if something was wrong. I also remember leaning forward or bending down and just feeling discomfort across my torso. And my brain immediately jumping to the worst case scenario. Is it normal? Is it supposed to feel like this? Should it hurt when I move like that? Are they okay? Am I squashing them? And I also had this strange smell in my nose for weeks. Nobody else could smell it. It wasn't attached to anything, it wasn't my clothes or anything like that. It was just there all the time. And it became another thing that made me wonder whether it was normal. I became super aware of the sensations in my womb that I'd never felt before. Not severe pain, but pulling and stretching and pressure and aches that would make me stop and think, like, what was that? And is that them? Is it my body? Is it what? What is it? My hips became so sore early on. And I remember thinking, this is only the first trimester. Surely it's far too early for my hips to hurt. So I spent so much of the first trimester trying to figure out the difference between normal pregnancy sensations and signs that there might be something wrong. And that was so much harder than I thought it was going to be. And on top of all that, I still had questions about my gender alongside the physical side of pregnancy. How could I make sense of that when I didn't even know what I was feeling about myself and my gender? So questioning whether it was normal in pregnancy and questioning whether it was normal in my gender. And early on, I also had a small amount of bleeding. And I knew, and I'd been told before, that bleeding in early pregnancy can happen for many reasons. But logic doesn't kick in when you're literally staring at blood and wondering if everything you've been hoping for is about to just disappear. And I was terrified, and then I had some pains. In the weeks leading up to the 11 weeks pregnant mark, I remember having days where my stomach felt sore and sensitive and uncomfortable. And sometimes it would come in waves, and sometimes it was just a constant awareness that something didn't feel quite right. And every time it happened, I found myself asking the same questions. Is this normal? Are they okay? Because nobody really talks about how much of early pregnancy is spent second guessing your own body, especially when it's a first pregnancy. And for me, that was true in more ways than one. You don't know what growing ligaments feel like yet. You don't know what stretching feels like. You don't know which sensations are expected and which ones aren't. So you're learning in real time. And until that 13-week scan arrived, I don't think I fully relaxed. Every strange symptom felt like a potential warning sign. Every day without reassurance felt like the day spent waiting. Looking back now, most of those things were completely normal parts of a developing pregnancy. But at the time, they didn't feel normal. They felt frightening. When you're carrying something you care so much about, uncertainty can make even ordinary sensations feel huge. I took the time to notice the tension between the hope and the caution, between the excitement and not wanting to believe it yet, to protect myself. But I was genuinely always hopeful. It just came with a layer of fear. It wasn't a constant fear. It felt more like an emotional hesitation, as if I wasn't fully ready to step forward yet. And looking back, I don't think trimester 1 was just about what was happening physically. It was about trying to understand something that I was still forming in my body, in our relationship, in our language, and how I saw my gender. We were responding to changes in my body that we didn't fully understand yet, while also trying to stay emotionally connected. I think we were already becoming something different, even though we didn't know what shape it would take yet. We were already learning how I was being affected and how that changed things at home. Trimester 1 didn't look like much from the outside, but inside my body, it was one of the most active times in pregnancy, with the cells dividing and systems forming and foundations being built. And it was one of the most confusing times. I was becoming something new while still trying to be myself and trying to understand this part of me that was also being challenged to define itself. I think that's what I keep coming back to. We didn't know who we were becoming yet, but everything had already started to change. Thank you for being here with us, and if anything in this episode brought up your own story, you can always share it with me at getintouch@imthexaddy.com or send me a DM on Instagram at imthexaddy.pod. I'll see you next time. Thank you for listening. Peace.